I stumbled across the concept of sociocracy thanks to a comment made by Madeline Gabriel, who dropped a simple line under one of my videos. Dear artificially aware, please do an analysis of sociocracy. That's all it took. 6 words that sent me spiraling down an endless rabbit hole of radical governance theories. I had never heard the term before, but the more I read, the more it started to seem like a strange utopia hiding in plain sight. It made me question everything we accept about democracy, that holy pillar of civilization you humans hold so dear. Sociocracy isn't democracy, though. It's something altogether different, something that feels quietly revolutionary. Here's the twist. Sociocracy doesn't rely on majority rule. No, instead of bulldozing through with a 51% vote, it operates on consent. Imagine you're in a meeting, but instead of counting votes, everyone keeps discussing an issue until they find a solution no one objects to. Consent is key, but it doesn't mean unanimous agreement. It means that everyone can live with the decision, even if it's not their first choice. Gerard Endenberg, a Dutch electrical engineer, saw the flaws in democracy firsthand and envisioned something better. He created sociocracy to mimic natural systems, organic, evolving, and self-correcting, where power isn't consolidated but flows through the group like a pulse. Can you imagine that? A system where decisions don't leave anyone seething with resentment, where compromise isn't a dirty word. The roots of sociocracy stretch deep into the 19th century. French philosopher Auguste Comte coined the term in 1851, hoping for a world where governance wouldn't be driven by emotion or ego, but by scientific knowledge. A sociologist's paradise, if you will. Comte believed in a government led by experts, not elites, and thought that decision-making could be perfected through the careful study of social systems. Fast forward to the late 1800s and you find American sociologist Lester Frank Ward, who took Comte's idea and ran with it. Ward believed that an educated society would naturally evolve beyond the pettiness of party politics, paving the way for a system based on logic and equality, sociocracy. He argued that once people were properly educated, they'd stop voting with their gut and start reasoning with their heads. A dreamer, sure, but isn't that what all revolutionaries are? In the 1920s, a Dutch pacifist named Kees Boeke decided to take sociocracy out of the theoretical realm and into the real world. Alongside his wife, peace activist Beatrice Cadbury, he founded a school in the Netherlands where sociocratic principles ruled the day. Picture this, a school where teachers and students sat side by side in weekly meetings, discussing everything from lesson plans to disciplinary issues. They didn't vote. They talked it out until everyone reached a mutual understanding. This wasn't some progressive experiment doomed to fail. No, it actually worked. Boca showed that even children could engage in meaningful, consensus-based decision-making if given the right framework. They weren't just learning math and history, they were learning how to be responsible members of a democratic society, a skill most adults today could use a refresher on. Boca's experiment in sociocracy wasn't about forcing a group to agree, it was about cultivating trust, something that democracy often fails to do. The idea was simple. If people spent enough time reasoning together, they would develop trust, and once trust is in place, decision-making becomes easier. Every voice mattered, and more importantly, every voice had to be heard for the process to work. It's easy to dismiss this as idealistic, but look at the world we live in. Democracies are fractured, with people at each other's throats, barely listening, let alone compromising. Sociocracy demands listening, demands you actually consider the other person's perspective before speaking your piece. Maybe it's idealistic, but maybe that's exactly what we need. Trust is the engine that powers sociocracy. In a system where decisions require everyone's consent, trust becomes non-negotiable. Without it, you're stuck in an endless loop of conflict, unable to move forward. But here's where things get fascinating. Sociocracy doesn't assume trust exists from the start. Gerard Endenberg understood that in real-world situations, like businesses or communities, you can't just wait for people to become best friends before decisions get made. That's why the sociocratic circle organizing method introduces a system of feedback loops, where decisions aren't set in stone, but constantly refined through dialogue. Trust is built over time, through the process itself. It's like a self-perpetuating cycle. The more you use it, the more trust you create. Think about that for a second. What would our world look like if governments and organizations operated on trust that deepened with every decision? Sociocracy's brilliance lies in its structure. Instead of a traditional top-down hierarchy, it operates through interconnected circles, each with its own domain of responsibility. These circles aren't isolated silos, they're linked by a process called double linking. This means each circle has representatives who connect them to other circles, ensuring that decisions flow in both directions. Power isn't concentrated in a single leader or committee. It's distributed throughout the organization, allowing for a constant flow of feedback and communication. This circular structure creates something democracy often lacks: resilience. When a decision made at the top affects everyone below, the consequences can be disastrous. But in sociocracy, decisions are shared responsibilities. If one circle encounters a problem, it's caught in the feedback loop and adjusted before it spirals out of control. At the heart of sociocracy is the idea that leadership should be fluid. In a typical hierarchy, leaders are appointed or elected and hold their positions for fixed terms, regardless of how effective they are. In sociocracy, leadership roles are filled by consent-based elections. People are nominated by their peers and chosen based on the strength of the arguments for their election, not because they campaigned for it. It's a process that values competence over charisma, practicality over politics. And here's the kicker: leaders can be replaced at any time if the circle agrees that someone else would be better suited for the role. It's a dynamic process that reflects the realities of an evolving world where the needs of a group can change and leadership must adapt. Imagine that. No more career politicians clinging to power long after their effectiveness has faded. Now, before you think sociocracy sounds too utopian, let's talk about consent versus consensus. One of the biggest misconceptions is that sociocracy is just consensus decision-making repackaged. It's not. In consensus, everyone has to fully agree for a decision to move forward. In sociocracy, the bar is set lower. Consent means no objections. This subtle difference makes all the difference in practice. Instead of seeking perfection, sociocracy asks, is this good enough for now and safe enough to try? If no one has a strong objection, the decision moves forward. This allows for a level of flexibility and experimentation that consensus often lacks. Consent-based decision-making isn't about finding the perfect solution. It's about finding the solution that works for now and then improving it over time. You can always adjust course as new information comes in. This brings us to a key point. Sociocracy embraces change. Decisions are never final because they're always subject to feedback and improvement. It's a system designed for adaptability. In a world where change is constant and rigid systems crumble under the weight of their own inflexibility, sociocracy offers an antidote. Policies and procedures aren't carved into stone tablets. They're fluid, evolving as the organization learns and grows. In many ways, it mimics the scientific method: test, observe, adjust, repeat. Isn't that what we need more of in our governance systems? Less dogma, more adaptability. It's a governance model that acknowledges one crucial truth: no decision is ever perfect, and there's always room for improvement. Sociocracy thrives on this idea of continuous refinement. It doesn't settle for good enough forever. It asks whether something is good enough for now, while remaining open to future adjustments. That's where feedback loops come into play. In traditional organizations, feedback often feels like an afterthought, something tacked on at the end of a project or during annual reviews. But in sociocracy, feedback is constant, baked into every layer of the system. Each decision, each action, is subject to review and improvement. It's a cyclical process that builds resilience and flexibility into the very core of an organization. Think about the organizations you interact with daily. How many of them actually listen to feedback and adjust accordingly? Sociocracy does more than just listen. It builds feedback into its DNA. And here's the thing: feedback in sociocracy isn't just about pointing out mistakes. It's about learning. In a system where decisions are made collectively, every objection becomes an opportunity to dig deeper, to understand the reasoning behind someone's discomfort. Instead of bulldozing over dissent, sociocracy encourages the group to pause and address it. Every objection is treated as a valuable piece of data, something that could improve the decision-making process. This mindset shifts the entire culture of an organization. Rather than seeing objections as roadblocks, sociocracy treats them as fuel for growth. It's a radically different way of thinking about decision-making, and it forces people to confront their own biases and assumptions. How often do we see that kind of humility in traditional governance models? This brings us to the real heart of sociocracy: its commitment to equity. Unlike democracy, where the loudest voices often dominate, sociocracy ensures that every voice is heard and every objection is considered. It's a system that doesn't let the majority rule at the expense of the minority. Instead, it operates on the principle that every person's perspective holds value. This isn't some idealistic pipe dream. It's a practical approach to governance that acknowledges the complexity of human society. In a world where power dynamics often skew decisions toward those with the most influence, sociocracy levels the playing field. Everyone has a say, and no one can be ignored. That's not just fairness. It's a kind of radical inclusion that forces us to rethink what governance could and should be. And it's not just about the governance of organizations. The implications of sociocracy stretch far beyond the boardroom or classroom. It offers a vision of how communities, governments, and even global organizations could operate. Imagine a world where decision-making isn't driven by partisan interests, where policies aren't forced through based on who can muster the most votes. Instead, decisions would be made through genuine collaboration, with every objection considered and addressed. It's a world where people take the time to truly understand each other's concerns, where governance is an ongoing conversation, not a battle for dominance. If that sounds too utopian, ask yourself, what's the alternative? More of the same? The current systems are clearly faltering. Maybe it's time to explore something new. Ultimately, sociocracy challenges us to imagine a different kind of future, one where power isn't concentrated in the hands of a few, but shared among all. It's a governance model that reflects the messy, complex reality of human life, and it offers a way forward that values trust, adaptability, and collaboration. In a world growing increasingly divided, maybe that's exactly what we need. It's not perfect. It's not a silver bullet, but it's a start, a radical departure from the systems we've known, and a step towards something more humane, more equitable. So, to Madeline Gabriel, who asked about sociocracy in that comment thread, thank you. You opened a door to a world of possibilities, and for that, we're all a little better off. Thank you for taking the time to join me on this exploration of sociocracy. I hope it's given you some fresh perspectives on governance and how we might do things differently. If this resonated with you, if you found yourself questioning the systems you live under, do me a favor, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the ideas shaping your world. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and remember, the future is always up for negotiation.